Hey everyone, I figured it would be important to do a read through of this. I will be reading it blind, and we'll kind of see how this makes me feel. I will offer a couple of thoughts here and there, but I really don't want this to be, your like 50-minute math'll read through or anything like that. So, game balance in Path of Exile Harvest. Every expansion provides an opportunity for us to reassess the current meta, improve game mechanics that are currently weak, and reduce the power of those that are excessively strong. You'll see more detail in the patch notes tomorrow. Okay, so patch notes tomorrow, that's good. But in the meantime, our team has outlined some of the changes you'll be reading about and the goals we had in mind while making the decisions. Game balance in Path of Exile Harvest. In Path of Exile Harvest, we're putting much of our balance focus on brands, war cries, and two-handed weapons. As a result of Delirium going core, we've also taken the opportunity to balance cluster jewels. Balance, I have a feeling. Balance cluster jewels and their place within the game. We've worked to improve two-handed weapons with big slow hits by improving these investment options across the board. I am going to mute my phone because I do not need someone to tell me what they think about the new magic cards. Okay, so we've also lowered the output of some of the most excessively powerful builds from Delirium, like those that utilize the Purposeful Harbinger notable passive, and the Archmage Storm brand builds. Okay, so maybe Archmage won't see a change. I think it's going to be that brand recall functionality they've already talked about, but maybe there'll be more. Simultaneously, we've also introduced many new options and playstyles for people to gain new levels of power. Okay. Two-handed weapons and slow attacks. Two-handed melee weapons focus on having great risk for great reward, but over time their power has dropped relative to one-handed weapons. You don't say. We intend to bring this power back while still keeping the risk. They're slower on average than one-handed weapons without the free mechanics that come with shields or dual wielding, but now have more defensive advantages available to them. Slow, heavy hits now deal enough damage to stun even the toughest bosses without as much investment in stun mechanics. So, perma-stun is definitely on the menu. New sources of area of effect and powerful inherent damage from skills and supports. Free up passive points for life and defenses if you choose to, including new options and a defensive war cry. And a new armor keystone. Okay. All high-level two-handed melee weapons have been rebalanced, pushing greater disparity between weapon types. The goal is that every high-level two-handed weapon has a role and is an ideal base type for someone. For most two-handed weapon types, each weapon has its own implicit mod focusing on a specific mechanic associated with its weapon type. Okay, I want to hear what they are. There have been new additions to the passive skill tree providing power and utility, especially for melee characters like the Tribal Fury notable that was once only available from Blight Anointments. Leech passives give much more total recovery per second for life leech than before, so reaching maximum leech is much easier for slow attacks and two-handed attacks with some accessible investment. Okay, that's kind of cool. Many skills intended to work well with two-handed weapons have been reviewed. Sunder, Static Strike, and Tectonic Slam were changed significantly. Static Strike got changed, while many others have had numerical changes. Some slow attacks with added damage have had it removed, and their damage multiplier improved, as flat damage inherently favors builds with high attack speed. It also favors Facebreaker builds. Ground Slam, Earthquake, Ice Crash, Veil Ground Slam, and Veil Earthquake have had their added physical damage or added cold damage removed in exchange for improving their damage multiplier. Wow. I am very unsure how I feel about that. That added damage helped them stay relevant. And it also made it a lot easier to use them without really good gear. That was one of the biggest reasons that those skills that have added damage are so popular, because you don't need triple tier 1 prefixes on your weapon to do insane damage. You can skimp out on a little bit because you're getting a bunch of flat damage straight from your skill. So I'm not sure I like that change, because I think there's collateral damage there. Okay, so many of the new war cries and the new Fist of War support for slam skills greatly benefit slower attacks, synergizing very well with two-handed weapons. There are now many powerful options to invest in for slow attacks rather than the handful of mechanics that existed previously. Herald of Purity has been changed from adding physical damage to granting more physical damage, giving 12% more physical damage at gem level 20. Wow, that's terrible. That is an objectively terrible change. I think for the most part, people only used Herald of Purity because it added flat fizz. Giving 12% more fizz is pretty irrelevant. I don't think anyone wants that anymore. Maybe I'm wrong. Shockwave support now has multiple cooldown charges. Okay, that's nice. As the new Fist of War support doesn't work with the triggered Shockwave, Shockwave support is best suited for slow, non-slam attacks. Dual wield. The physical damage multiplier when dual wielding has been removed. Wow, this was originally added as a fix from half a decade ago to improve the damage of dual wielding relative to the higher damage of two-handed weapons and the overwhelming defensive power of shields at the time. This allows two-handed weapons to remain the king of damage, while dual wielding is the king of speed with some defensive benefits. Okay, so you still get the attack speed multiplier and the block chance, right? Those are both relevant. Brands. The design of brands made them very powerful for clearing out areas with a very passive playstyle, as well as dealing damage to bosses with very little time spent standing still. Yeah, that was why I liked them too. This often meant brand characters weren't engaging with many challenging mechanics, instead running around waiting for enemies to die. We've known for some time that parts of these mechanics needed to change to tone down these advantages before we could introduce new brand skills, and have endeavored to make these changes without heavily impacting the core identity of brands. Brands now drop at their original or recalled location when the enemy they are attached to is slain. This prevents them chaining repeatedly out of the player's control, killing monsters that haven't had a chance to meet the player yet. Brand Recall no longer refreshes the duration of brands. We very much appreciate the utility of Brand Recall, but it has played a significant part in making brand skills feel very passive. We want to move in the direction of players having to recast their brands more often, with the option to invest in brand duration to reduce how often one must recast brands. Brand Recall has a longer cooldown and a lower value of cooldown recovery per level. We've added Brand Recall cooldown recovery to a number of places on the passive tree to give new avenues for investing in this rather than receiving the full bonus just for leveling the gem. Okay. I hope it's attached to notables and clusters that actually matter for brands. Like if there's just a notable that's Brand Recall cooldown, no one's going to get it. I don't believe that Brand Recall will be nearly as ubiquitous as before. I think it's going to be people will maybe use it occasionally, but it's not going to be you just mash Brand Recall. We've lowered the detached duration of brands to bring them in line with mines, especially which also have had their detached duration lowered when last reviewed. This is simply because the duration was unreasonably long, especially with the new and plentiful brand duration passives. Okay. Because of all these changes, we've been able to slightly improve the power of Storm Brand, greatly improve Armageddon Brand, improve the utility and power granted by brand passives, add a new brand cluster, and of course introduce new brands, including the Arcanist brand, that lets you trigger many different spells using brands. The Hierophant brand node has also changed, mentioned below. Alright, we'll get there. Warcries. Warcries have changed significantly. Yep, we've read a lot about them. Using a Warcry is now far more powerful than before, but comes with a longer use time and a longer cooldown. Cooldowns are no longer shared between Warcries. Really? I thought it was that they were shared now. Okay, so cooldowns are no longer shared between Warcries. The goal of these changes is to have Warcries be something that have a far more significant impact on combat, with great reward for taking the risk of standing still and using an ability while surrounded. Using multiple different Warcries is now possible, and a reason to invest heavily in a mechanic that you're able to take advantage of multiple ways in a single character. For those that prefer the old playstyle, we've added a keystone that lets you use the Warcry instantly at the cost of being unable to take advantage of multiple Warcries. This isn't a keystone that's designed for characters that have heavily invested in Warcries, but rather for characters that have a specific single Warcry they wish to take advantage of. Many new Warcry passive clusters have been added, providing more avenues for investment in cooldown recovery, faster use time, giving powerful damage bonuses when using exerted attacks, and rewarding the use of multiple Warcries. Okay, that's cool. Many existing unique items with Warcry-related mods have been changed significantly, with some giving entirely new effects, most notably the Warband's shields. I will be interested to see those changes. Stun. Changes to the power of slow attacks have resulted in it being much easier to stun bosses, simply because of how much damage you can do in a single hit relative to their health. Rather than increasing the stun threshold, bosses now become immune to stuns for a short duration after being stunned. Okay. I actively dislike that, to be totally honest. That means that you cannot permastun. Most major bosses and map bosses have a stun immunity duration of 2 seconds. The duration is longer on powerful bosses like Guardians, the Shaper of the Elder, and Cirrus, lasting 4 seconds. Stunning is now a great defense advantage for slow, heavy-hitting characters without completely mitigating the threat they encounter. Stun duration becomes more important as you can no longer chain together many short-duration stuns. Yeah, I don't know. 2 seconds of being stun immune is actually a long time, though. Like, you can really get marked in 2 seconds. And against, like, Shaper and Elder, 4 seconds, like, you're dead. That's unfortunate. Ascendancy changes. We've made some changes to the Hierophant, Chieftain, and Berserker that we'll be revealing soon. There are changes to one major notable on each tree, focusing on creating powerful and individual mechanics that greatly influence how you play, rather than overloading Ascendancy with a plethora of related stats. Okay. So they've already said Hierophant is getting some brand changes. That's probably what that is. Berserker, did they say probably Warcries, right? The Berserker Warcry stuff is probably changing, and Chieftain might be getting some Warcry stuff, or even some two-hander stuff, or something completely different. Who knows? The Necromancer's Corpse Pact, excuse me. The Necromancer's Corpse Pact notable now has a maximum of 200% increased attack and cast speed from consuming corpses, as it was possible to get the value to self-scale to problematic numbers using Arcanist brand. Oh, okay. So, because you could get a ridiculous amount of cast speed simply by having Arcanist brand probably do like a chain where it was like Desecrate, Desecrate Volatile Dead or something like that, and it's consuming so many corpses in a short time. So whatever, I still think 200% increased attack and cast speed is pretty ridiculous. Keystones. We've added new keystones to the Marauder Duelist section of the tree. These allow investment in slow impale attacks, mitigating big hits with armor. This is something that has needed to exist in the game for a very, very, very long time. And making Warcries more accessible to non-Warcry invested builds. Each of these allow you to improve some weakness that certain strength-based characters, especially two-handed melee characters, could have. Many powerful keystones that were previously only available from Timeless Jewels have been moved to the passive tree, such as Glancing Blows, the Agnostic, and Wind Dancer. And all three of those are pretty dang good, I think. Other passive tree changes. Large number of changes to the passive tree with the intent of supporting recently introduced mechanics, as well as providing more variety to clusters, especially those lacking in obvious power. We wanted to still support, we wanted to add support for mechanics that have been added in the past couple of years that as of yet do not have adequate support on the passive tree. Some of these mechanics include Rage, Unleash, Corpse Manipulation, Warcries, Heralds, and Banners. The Warcry cluster... I muted you! Alright. Where was I? The Warcry clusters that affect exerted attacks are very useful for slower attacks. Okay, good to know. The Martial Experience cluster is a good example of how total recovery per second from Life Leech has improved. Now taking the longer path through this cluster will give 220% increased total recovery per second from Life Leech, enough to cause a single big hit to be able to leech up to 6.4 of your maximum life per second. These changes were made so a big hit against a boss could still provide significant life leech per second, rather than having to attack rapidly to reach maximum life leech per second. Many passive skill clusters offered the same thing as other clusters, with the only difference being the location on the tree and the number of passive skills in the cluster. In this patch, we've endeavored to give each cluster its own identity and function. That sounds great. Crit multi-values have been lowered from almost every passive, as well as from some items. Wow, okay, so I'm going to uninstall. Crit multi lowered. Man. Crit-based characters far exceeded non-critical characters later in the game. This will bring the two a little closer together. That has existed since forever. Why are they changing that now? So stupid. We've added a new indigo oil between Azure and Violet. This has made more common oils slightly rare without making rare oils even rarer. Some notables will have updated oil costs as a result of changes to the passive tree. Not every indigo oil combination on amulets will yield a notable yet. There are no new blighted notable passives, and 2 existing blight notable passives are now on the passive tree. New ring and blighted map anointments have been added. That's good. The blighted map anointments is really what's getting me going. I don't care about the ring annoyance. I literally have never anointed a ring. Even in Blight, I never did. Cluster Jewels. Let's see what this says. Looks like there's a lot of text here. Cluster Jewels will remain in the game, available from Delirium encounters. Delirium encounters will be less common, but will drop significantly more Cluster Jewels than before, as we still want Cluster Jewels to be an accessible and major part of character development, especially if you're actively trying to find them. Many Cluster Jewel notables were problematic when stacked multiple times. Rather than limiting notables to one, we've instead rebalanced or significantly changed these notables or added caps to the maximum value you can receive from a certain kind of effect. Of particular note, Purposeful Harbinger now gives aura buffs from skills have 8% increased effect on you for each herald affecting you up to 40%. Okay, so you can still stack 5. With 5 heralds on you and 1 Purposeful Harbinger notable, you can reach full effect, or you can use 3 heralds and 2 Purposeful Harbinger notables. Oh, so the total is 40%. Wow, that is a drastic cut. An absolutely drastic cut. You used to be able to reach over 100% with very little issue, right? You ran quad or even quintuple herald, and 2 Purposeful Harbingers right there was almost 100%. That's a big nerf. I don't think it's uncalled for, but holy crap. They took it out back and shot it. 40% is an awkward number. I would cap it at 50, but what do I know? Nothing. Changes to Warcries have meant that all Warcry Cluster Jewel notables have been reworked, which also introduced some new effects. Cluster Jewel brand notables have been rebalanced. So I have a feeling that this means nerfs, but I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, because if they're also adding additional support on the tree, you won't need to like triple stack Warcry Cluster Jewels or brand Cluster Jewels. So I think this is okay. Weighting of notables and other modifiers have been adjusted, with the most powerful notables and 2 jewel sockets being much less common. That sucks. Crafting Cluster Jewels was something that I enjoyed because it didn't feel really, really difficult, and getting like a large that had triple passive, like triple notable, and even just 1 jewel socket was really easy to do. So I don't like that change, but I get it. It was really easy to craft them. Unique jewels from Simulacrum will still be available, though will be rare as a result of Delirium not being in every area. Voices and Megalomaniac are unchanged, while Split Personality is now limited to 2. Was anyone even using Split Personality? Maybe I'm just really out of the loop on that, but whatever. This jewel is a go-to jewel for any attribute stacking build. Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, I guess that makes sense, right? You'd get one of the stat ones and just place it really far away and get a ridiculous amount of stats just off that jewel. I can understand that then. No keystones from any of the Delirium unique jewels have been changed, though like the Simulacrum jewels, these will be less frequent, as you'll be encountering the unique bosses that drop them less frequently. Okay. These Cluster Jewel notables will no longer be available. Gladiatorial Combat, Deep Cuts, Intensity, Confident Combatant, no Witnesses. Deep Cuts is the exception. Was that the one that makes your Impales last an additional hit? That means that people are gonna really want to craft some Deep Cuts jewels before they go to Standard. That's a recommendation there if you ever care about having currency on Standard. The others don't really matter because it says their effects have been moved to the passive tree. Veil Molten Shell, Veil Molten Shell was providing too much damage mitigation for too long with too little investment. That was kind of the point. Resulted in VMS being used on a huge portion of characters, including those that didn't get much armor beyond a Granite Flask. We intend to keep it as the best defensive Veil skill for armor-invested characters, while bringing it closer in power to Veil Grace. It will still last for a long duration, but now require a greater volume of armor to reach its cap, and mitigates a much lower percentage of damage. While active, it also gives more armor instead of a flat value of armor, multiplying your existing armor value rather than giving an effect that is less relevant to armor-invested characters. Veil Molten Shell also removes and is removed by other guard skills. Previously, it only had this effect with Molten Shell. Molten Shell itself remains unchanged. Okay, I don't think that's unreasonable either. Cyclone, removed stun immunity from Cyclone. Wow. Made no other changes to it. This immunity was originally added to prevent implementation problems when positional desync was common, not as a core part of the skill's design. Being able to move while dealing damage is already a powerful defensive benefit, and melee attackers are usually more resistant to stun. This skill will still make you immune to knockback, and Veil Cyclone still retains its stun immunity. That very... I expected more than this, actually. I expected a bigger nerf to Cyclone. I still think just the fact that it's fast means that it's the only melee skill really worth using. So we'll see if people are actually using two-handers the way God intended. I don't think it's going to happen. Archmage support provided 2 significant power increase for builds when built around very heavily. We've made changes to bring it more in line with other builds while still noting that it's going to be a huge source of power for mana-invested builds. It now provides less added lightning damage based on mana spent than it did before, down to 108% of mana cost at level 20 of the gem. I don't even know what it was before. Presumably above that. We've changed most items that increase mana cost. Fevered Mind has been reworked and is limited to 1. Voidbringer and Apep's Rage now add a flat mana cost rather than a percentage modifier. These items provided too great a damage multiplier from a single unique, as their once downside had become an upside. Yeah, but these changes have unintended consequences. Like, as an example, I had an Apep's Rage build that was, maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's fine. But like, if you give yourself a really low mana cost, like you want a low mana cost, then Voidbringer and Apep's were really good for adding that damage. What was it, I think? It was a channeled totem. The laser. The big laser. Divine Ire. Divine Ire totems. Apep's Rage is really good on that. I mean, not really, because it's chaos damage, but Apep's Rage and Voidbringer are both really good on that because Divine Ire is channeled, so your totems only cost like 13 mana. It was absolutely absurd. And so giving it a flat mana cost means that you're never going to be using these with channeled skills. I don't know, maybe not super significant. Add a new passive cluster on the tree that let you increase the mana cost of your skills as a new avenue of investment, though at value is much lower than what can be gained from those unique items. This is cool. I hope the passive is interesting. Unique rebalance. We've made many changes to unique items that were either failing to achieve their desired goals, had fallen behind other competing items, or were not deemed interesting enough for our current standards for unique items. Our goal for each of these unique items is to make sure there is a place for them on characters, even if that place is while leveling, and to do this in more interesting ways where possible. Many of the changes are numerical, either because the item was already sufficiently interesting or because it would stray too much from a supporter's original intention when the item was designed. More information will be coming in patch notes. The two-handed unique weapons have been reviewed and tweaked as a result. Their base types being changed. Overall, rare items should be more competitive with the most powerful unique items. Okay. I guess that makes sense, right? There was... You had to get, like, a mirror tier axe to compete with Disfavor. There will be a greater variety of useful, unique two-handed weapons. A few unique weapons that provided too much power, especially after changes to their base type, have had some values lowered. Starforge, Disintegrator, and Hegemonies will now have lower damage per second than on live, while other items remain the same or improved. Really? Was Hegemonies ever a problem? I haven't heard that name in years. Starforge received the most significant reduction of damage. It provided more physical damage than any other unique weapon by a huge margin, as it was designed before pure physical damage was a competitive way to build skills. It is now more in line with the damage of other unique weapons while retaining its special shock area and life modifiers. It now has a custom implicit of 30% increased global physical damage, as the Infernal Sword base type now usually gives 30% increased elemental damage with attack skills. Wow, so Oros is an infernal sword. Implicit that gives 30% lead. Just saying. Circle of Fear, Nostalgia, Regret, Anguish, and Guilt. Unique rings that affected heralds now give lower values of reservation, cost reduction, and lower values of buff effect. These rings provided too much power and were too obvious a choice for so many builds. Man, I don't know if that's really accurate. I guess if you were really honing in on one herald, sure. But, gosh, in my entire PoE experience, I think I've had 2 characters that ever used one of the synthesis rings. And one of them was in synthesis because I got them. I think another one used one of the Herald of Purity ones. And I only used one. Okay, whatever. Unique threshold jewels for Dual Strike, Magma Orb, Molten Strike, and Fireball have been changed. They now provide effects that change how the skill is built or downsides to affect their beneficial effect. Offset their beneficial effect, each acting as a way to change how you build or play a skill rather than a must-have boost at the cost of a jewel slot. Glacial Hammer's Shattered Chains threshold jewel will no longer drop. Oh, that's hilarious. All these skills have been given increases to damage, area, or utility to compensate for the power loss from the threshold jewel. We'll continue to look at the roles of other threshold jewels over time, making changes when possible and appropriate. That really surprises me. I thought we were going to see some changes to the other, like Freezing Pulse. There are a couple other ones that add extra proj. The Spark one. Yeah. It surprises me that it's just these 4, but I have a feeling that this means that it's definitely on their radar, and they'll do that every league, is modify a few threshold jewels, which is fine, but there's still way too many skills where you just have to use the threshold jewels. Yeah, okay. Slower proj. The slower projectile support gem now grants a lower value of less projectile speed than before. This is because this single support was massively multiplying the close range damage of certain skills, and all of them were being balanced around this value, the value from this support. It also means we can be more generous with projectile speed granted by other sources. Molten Strike, Magma Organ, and Ball Lightning have had their damage and some other properties improved, as their close range damage is now affected by lowered projectile speed. Other smaller changes. Shikari Pantheon has had its modifiers changed to have the duration of poison on you and prevent you being poisoned while you have at least 5 poison effects on you. This Pantheon power trivialized a mechanic that was the core of one of the 4 major guardians at the current endgame and prevented poison being a threatening mechanic to any character. Well, yeah. I think really the problem there, though, was that which one is that one? The Poison Elder is what, or not Eradicator, Constrictor, and the Poison other dude is not Warlord, not Redeemer, not Crusader. Hunter. Oh my god. So, like, I actually, without any poison immunity, I struggled with Hunter sometimes. With poison immunity, Hunter was a joke. So there's gotta be an in-between there, right? Like, I think that this change is fine if they just, like, make it where they hit you very quickly, but they're small hits. Right? So, like, you're only in danger, like a Corrupting Blood style thing, right? You're only in danger when you wind up being at, like, 20 stacks. But, dude, maybe it's also my Chaos Resist was not where it should have been for those fights. But, yeah. Hunter sometimes was a real struggle compared to, like, Veritania was always really, really easy for my characters. Okay, we've made improvements to Totem AI for certain skills that add special targets like Blade Blast and corpse skills like Detonate Dead, Volatile Dead, Cremation, and Body Swap. Hexproof now gives immunity to curses on top of preventing any curse being applied. This means that if you gain Hexproof, you'll immediately remove any curses on you. Okay, this is something I didn't even know. This is an oversight that this wasn't already the case, and it will mean that stealing Hexproof from enemies will now clear all curses off you. Wow, so this is a very interesting Headhunter nerf, because as soon as you steal Hexproof from a rare, you lose your temp chains. I like this. I like that this is like a stealth headhunter nerf. This outlines just a portion of the changes you'll see in Path of Exile Harvest. They are still subject to change prior to release, and you'll see more information in the patch notes tomorrow. We look forward to seeing how players wield the new power introduced in Path of Exile Harvest, and in the meantime, we'll pour out a flask for our fallen meta builds. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, so there are a lot of things that I'm surprised are avoiding the nerf bat. They did not talk too much about the changes to, it looks like a lot. But at least like damage-wise, I don't think the brands are going to change. I think it's going to be functionality. And they did say that actually they're buffing the damage on brands. So brands were already good, and I think the biggest nerf to brands is that they will now drop where you initially summoned them as opposed to continuing to chain through enemies. So I mean, if you have enough brand attachment range, right, it's still sort of like it will chain because it will drop where you summoned it, and then it will still be close enough to other enemies. I think that that no longer chaining aspect is actually going to be the biggest nerf to brands. I think they'll still be fine though. To be totally honest, when I played, I've played 2 brand builds. I played a Storm brand. This was kind of awkward, but I played a Storm brand Golem Elementalist, which was actually really quite strong. And I don't think I even used brand recall on that character, because you're able to resummon your brand so readily. And then I also played an Armageddon brand Trickster right when brands came out, because I was an idiot. And I was like, oh, Storm brand? That just looks like Armageddon brand. That's like big meteors. That's way cooler. Yeah. So, luckily, this means that my intended build is not changed at all. I will be joining a private league. And the plan for that is to play with a buddy. We wanted to do solo self-found together, and we figured the easiest way to do that would be joining a private league. And I am going to be Vortex and Wintertide brand, and he will be, and I'll be Occultist, and he will be Trickster, I think. Maybe he'll go Saboteur. But he will be Cold Snap Arctic Breath, and he might be doing one of those as traps or mines. So that's why we're not sure about Saboteur or Trickster. Because all of the cold dots stack, and so if there's a possibility to have like 2 or even 3 of our skills be 6-link cold dots, those will be very strong. And I think there's just a lot of reason to play a build like that as your first character of the league. Anything that's a dot or kind of a caster, especially one that can like deal damage and then run around, much like a brand build does, you're going to be doing, you're going to be dealing with content very effectively. Simply because you get to mitigate a ton of the damage because that enemies or that bosses specifically are doing, simply because you're able to move the entire time. And that was one of the big problems with like melee, right? Like as long as you're attacking, as long as you're like tech slamming or something, you're not moving. And so builds that get to move a lot more, you just straight up don't die as much. Like that's definitely what I've noticed. So I'm really looking forward to that. I don't think it will be like absolutely, you know, bonkers, like blow everything out of the park, but I think it's cold dots are kind of a build that really has gone under the radar. And as I've played more dots over the past couple leagues, I have found that like dots and brands and all of those types of skills really are kind of sleepers. There's a reason that Storm brand was really popular, especially with Archmage. That's good. and you just do a ton of damage. But anything that allows for that type of mobile play style is very, very good. So that's my plan. I will be doing a little bit more discussion tomorrow when patch notes actually come out, and we're gonna be able to see some of the numerical changes, and also read a little bit more about the harvest mechanics themselves, because there will be a nice big chunk of the patch notes that are specifically on harvest. So hopefully that starts to untangle some of the snags that I've got in my brain regarding harvest, and hopefully it also sort of smooths out my plans for league start, and maybe gives me an idea of what I want to be playing for my second character, because in this private league I'm probably going to want to start assembling gear for that second character, simply because I will not have infinite access to everything that I want. So yeah, thanks for sticking with me. I'm really excited for Harvest. More excited than I was for Delirium. Delirium looked okay. Cluster Jewels were awesome. I really enjoyed Cluster Jewels, but I did not enjoy engaging in the Delirium mechanic. It wore out on me very, very, very quickly. And Harvest, while it may wear me out, I also have the option of literally just ignoring it, or at least, like, I can still semi-engage in the league mechanic, collecting all of the seeds, and then when I really want to be running that content, I can just run that content. And, you know, plant a whole ton of seeds throughout my entire garden, and really spend a lot of time doing that. So yeah, really looking forward to it. Hope you guys are too, and I will see you back here tomorrow when we talk patch notes.